Here. I'm about to tell a story that goes way back, and I was testing my memory as far back as I could go. That's how this all came about. I was born in 1941, a couple of months before the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. My dad went to school at Dunwoody Institute in Minneapolis, and so he got recruited almost immediately after the attack by Boeing aircraft, and they had just recently got a contract from the United States to defense to build B-29s. So Dad picked up the family and headed for Wichita, Kansas. Boeing actually is in Plainview. I think it's a suburb of Wichita. He was one of the first employees in that Boeing plant. His badge number was 86, I believe, and of the tens of thousands that have been employed there since, that's a pretty low number. We arrived in Kansas without a place to live. Now, I was just a baby in arms, so I don't remember that part of it. But my dad started working immediately. They weren't building the planes, but they were getting ready to. They were building hangars. They had to build new ones because the planes were so big. And this is the part that I remember, is that they put us in brand new housing that the government let out contracts and threw together. In later years, Dad told me that they were very cheaply made, poorly made. They did things like planted, I think it was crabgrass rather than lawn grass, just to make the yards green, and other shortcuts to just to get the places livable for people. Once we got into the housing, my mother decided to go to work at the plant also. They were desperate for employees. So she called back to Minnesota and recruited her sister, my Aunt Carol, to come to Kansas and take care of my sister and I. She was in high school at the time. I believe she was 16 years old. You might think that was the poor girl had to drop out of school, but she wound up being a college graduate and having a master's degree in education after the war. So she was a natural and became my surrogate mother. She was a fun person to be with. She made fun of everything, made life fun. One of the other things of that Boeing cut corners on in this housing was they didn't give you refrigerators, they gave you ice boxes. Now, there was several reasons besides the cost factor, I'm sure. Refrigeration requires metal, copper, and all sorts of metals, and metal was short because of the war effort. An icebox is just a wooden box with a container or a pan to put a big block of ice in. But it also required somebody to bring you the ice, and that's what Aunt Carol made a game for me. By then I was probably 2, maybe 3 years old. She would tell me that once a week the Iceman was coming. And my first impression was, I thought that was his name. And he would come to our back door and bring in a block of ice and put it into the refrigerator. Now, these guys that delivered the ice blocks, I don't know how they, what requirements they made to get the job, but they had to all be big, strong guys. because those blocks of ice had to weigh quite a bit. And they carried them into the house and put them into this little ice box. The routine on whatever day it was that they brought the ice, Carol would tell me that the Iceman was coming. And so I would take my place next to the back door on a double door. There was, once again, another shortcut to that housing. There was not truly a basement under the buildings. There was a small cellar. I was never down there, but I suspect that's where the furnace was and maybe stuff like that, utilities. But to get to it, you entered from the outside with a slanted double door that went like this, which probably wouldn't hold an adult, but it would hold a little kid like me quite easy. And that was my favorite spot to sit and watch for these people like the Iceman to come. When the Iceman would come, I'd be sitting there waiting for him, and he would go to the back of the trailer, and there were hanging down things. I think it were leather strips just to hold the cold from melting the ice blocks too fast. He would reach in with an ice tong, big scissor-like thing, and pull one of these enormous blocks to the edge of the trail. And he had some sort of leather apron, as I recall, that went over his shoulder. I think it was just to keep him from getting his shirt wet from the melting ice. Anyhow, he'd throw that huge block of ice on his shoulder, and he was a huge man, like I say. He was awesome to me. But he would always stop when he got it up, reach back into the back where the ice was, and pull out what they call a shard, I think, which a piece of ice that's broken off of a corner or something like that, an edge, looked like an icicle. You pick out a nice one, and then as he walked past me to the steps, he would hand me the ice shard, and he would say, "Hi kid, how are you doing today?" And I would say, "Thank you, Mr. Iceman." Like I said, I thought it was his real name. And Aunt Carol always taught me the manners. And he would proceed into the house with the block of ice and leave me sitting outside in the sun, sucking on the chunk of ice. It's not a real exciting memory, I guess, but it is one of my oldest memories. I think because of this big, gentle man that was my friend. Since then I've had a lot of frozen treats. I've had fudgesicles and popsicles and all sorts of ice creams and so forth. But when I think about it, my very favorite memory of any treat was when I was that little kid sitting in the hot Kansas sun, sucking on a piece of ice going to be by that gentle giant of a man. Thank you.